Hey everyone, I hope you've all been doing well. I know it's been a minute since I did a video. I just decided to take a quick social media break, a little social media detox because I believe, we all need that from time to time, especially just with, excuse me, anything and everything that's been going on in the world. But I wanted to hop on here because, a message has just been popping up for me recently, and it's been talking about like falsehoods and masks falling off. Now, when I say this, people are automatically thinking, oh, am I going to discover, say a friend is actually like a friend of me, or, just someone's deceiving me? Possibly, but honestly, I feel like this is more so something internally with yourself. I feel like a lot of us have been wearing these masks that society has placed on us. Whether it's the dutiful daughter or, the hardworking apprentice, whatever it is. And, we've been playing these roles for so long that we don't even know who we are as a person anymore. And I believe, these masks are starting to slip. And especially with this full moon coming up, it's definitely asking you to really just evaluate, who you are and what you want to be. Because I know oftentimes society will put like limitations or expectations of who we think we should be. And, often later times in life, we realize that what we thought and who we thought we are really isn't lining up with our soul and our soul's purpose. So I'm going to be using a few different cards for this reading. As I always say, please take what resonates and leave the rest behind. This is a timeless reading, even though I am reading in July. It is July 25th. If this message pops up to you later on in life, or just, whenever, then it's meant for you. All right. So, like I said, like the theme I'm getting is falsehoods and just masks coming off. So the first card I have is focus on your health, and it's in reverse. And as I mentioned before, yeah, like you're kind of like neglecting yourself right now. You're feeling maybe very lethargic, melancholy. You may be doing a lot of excess in things that you normally wouldn't do. And that's because, like, right now, like I said, like you're not being in tune to your true self. Like you're focusing on everything else besides what you should be focusing on. Like you're focusing on maybe like family, friends, work, things of that nature, but it's neglecting your health. It's neglecting, who you truly are. So with this in reverse, it's just letting you know, like, this is something that we need to focus on. And then the next card we have is see the humor, divinity, perspective, wisdom, and playful. So yeah, I mean, in a lot of situations, it's hard sometimes to see the humor, especially when you're going through it. And I've said this in multiple readings, but, I think spirit right now is just letting you know, like, in order to kind of get back to having that healthy balance in your life, you need to have a little fun. You need to be a little playful. Sometimes, honestly, just doing something that maybe you used to love when you were a kid can bring back that spark of who you were. I think oftentimes when we get older and we become adults, we think we have to act in a certain way. And like, yes, as an adult, we have to be responsible. We got to pay bills. We got to make sure that we're taking care of the house and the home. But at the same time, too, like I said, you're neglecting yourself. You're not seeing things from a different perspective. And like I said, the masks are falling. You're seeing that, like, you're unhappy. You're seeing that, like, your health is declining. And, I think spirit right now is just kind of letting you know now's the time to really just figure out who you are and what you want to be and where you want to go. So the next card, we have the power of prayer. At the bottom of the card, it says surrender, believe, affirm, and release. So yeah, we said this before. Prayer can heal a lot of different things. Regardless if you're someone who believes in God, spirit, the universe. I've always said in general, we all need to believe in something. It doesn't matter what it is. I feel like we all need to have that one thing that gets us up in the morning, that gets us moving, that gets us focused. Because if we can't sit there and think of something to believe in, something that is going to have us continue, then we're lost. We're just literally just beings and souls just walking around, and we really have no purpose. But the power of prayer, like I said, isn't, in my mind, in my eyes, doesn't always mean you have to pray to God or spirit, or angels, or your ancestors. But also too, it's like affirmations. It's self-talk. Sometimes we need to be our own hero. Sometimes we need to be our own champion and, be like, okay, like, I can do this. What's stopping me? What's my limitations? Write out the pros and cons. So just like affirm, surrender to the fact that you may not know everything and you want to try and figure it out, and that's perfectly fine. But this whole I need to act this way because society says in order for me to make it, to survive, to do this, to do that, that needs to go. That needs to be released. And then we have Jophiel. Yeah. Once again, Jophiel is all about compassion, self-care, simplification, beauty. This all falls in line with what I'm saying. In order for us to really truly figure out who we are, we need to have compassion for ourselves. We need to do a little self-care. I think oftentimes too, we overcomplicate things, like I said, because we have the perception of who we want to be. We have the perception of how the world views us. And then we have the perception of who, that's a little bit in between. And usually that in between is who we actually truly are, right? So if you're someone who you always daydreamed about being famous, and then the world also too just kind of sees you as someone who lives in the shadows, kind of more of a contributor worker. The in between, the middle part could be the fact that yes, you could be someone who's going to become famous one day, but it may not be straight up in front of the camera. It could be the fact that you're a writer, and the way for you to become famous and to get your work out there is just by writing stories and telling your story. You know what I mean? And like I said, it's just now is the time more so than ever. I think that it's hard to continue to keep up with this persona or this lifestyle that's not truly and authentically you. And this is just a quick story. I went grocery shopping the other day, and I remember the cashier was just saying to the person in front of me that what's happening right now just doesn't feel real. And I think the reason why it doesn't feel real, one, is because we've been taught in all these sets of rules of how things should be governed and society should function, things like that. And I'm not talking about the government, I'm just talking about things in general. And now it's no longer working. And the reason why it's no longer working is because it's so outdated. It's outside of the realms of where things are going. A lot of people, honestly, and the reason why things don't feel real are actually they're being their true selves. They're being their real selves. And a lot of us are still hiding, who we really truly are. I think oftentimes people don't want someone to look at you as being a bad person, because you may have thoughts that aren't always, positive. Like I remember saying the other day, I had a conversation with a couple of my friends. I'm just like, I said something like, I'm tired of being a good person. But like, what I meant by that wasn't that I wanted to go out and just do like, evil things or, harm anyone. It was a situation of like, I'm just tired of playing by society's rule of what deems to be a good person. Because I know deep down I'm a good person. I don't go out of my way to hurt anyone. I try and help people if I possibly can. But at the same time, like sometimes like, like just playing by the quote unquote rules, it gets annoying and it gets frustrating. It doesn't make me a bad person if like every once in a while, like I tell a white lie, or if I don't always constantly follow the rules. And I think that's the problem too, is that sometimes we're so polarized with things being black or white that we never look at the shades of gray, the in between, right? So like, and I think that's the problem, is the fact that like, once you start acting a little bit outside of your character, people start looking at you like, what's wrong with you? Like, are you okay? Like, this doesn't seem like it's you. But the reality is this is always you. But you've always went to like an extreme of one way versus the other. It's like, a good example is like, if you look at someone who is quote unquote the bad guy, and like they're constantly doing things that are deemed to be selfish, and then one day like all of a sudden like they just decide to like, I don't know, give to the poor or like whatever, and then you're just like, oh, that's weird, that's outside of their realm. Like, what's their intention? What are they actually doing? And the reality could be is the fact that like they never meant to be the villain. Like, they never meant to be someone who everyone despised or hated. It's just the fact that because they were living their life in their true authentic way, and sometimes what they did may seem to be selfish, that people can't picture them being a good person. Or vice versa, if someone has always given and then one day they just decided they want to say no, then all of a sudden it's like, well, what's wrong with them? There's nothing wrong with you. Like I said, like, take off that mask. It's okay to be more than one thing. So I'm going to pull like one more card from this pile, and then I think I'm going to switch to another deck. And then the card I have is Zadkiel, and that is Destiny, Pride, Conscious, and Forgiveness. And, like I said, with Zadkiel, once again, he's about trying to find yourself. Like, it's just the perfect card. Like I said, I think oftentimes, we don't really truly know who we are, because like I said, we've been playing this role for so long. And Zadkiel's here just to say, you know what, it's okay to forgive yourself. It's okay to forgive yourself. It's okay to forgive others for, judging you in such a harsh way, or in such a manner that like you felt like you were potentially just stuck because like you didn't want to disappoint them. But like, don't let, because at the bottom of the card right here it says Pride and Destiny, don't let your pride keep you from your destiny. Like, don't let, like, because you have constantly just been in this phase of this is who I am, that I can't switch at any point in time. Because like, the reality is you are, because as a person, regardless of your age, you're constantly growing, you're constantly learning, you're constantly maturing. And to say that this is me and like this is how I have to operate and that's it, for the rest of my life is absolutely crazy. Because things in life constantly change, we're constantly in influx, and it's not going to get better for you if you continue to keep hiding who you truly are. All right, so I'm going to switch from these cards and grab my tarot deck. All right, So let's just go and ask angels, spirit, the guides, you know, what lessons are we learning by hiding our true self? That's one of the questions I want to ask. What lessons are we learning by hiding our true self, if any? Alright. So the first card I have right here is the Knight of Cups. So what I'm getting from this card, the Knight excuse me, of Cups, is, you know, you're a person who's constantly giving. And the lesson that I feel like you're receiving, or you're trying to learn from not being your true authentic self, is like you're giving from a cup that's not full. You know, like you can see with excuse me this card, you know, you have the knight on the horse. He's moving forward, he's extending his hand, he wants to give to others, but at the same time, like, at least when I'm looking at the card, he looks kind of sad. He like doesn't look very happy. He looks kind of melancholy. Like he feels like, oh, like I'm supposed to constantly just be giving, but like who's giving it to me? And I think that's the problem, is that like if you're constantly giving from a cup that is empty, you have nothing for yourself. You have nothing to, you know, give back to yourself. And that's the biggest thing, is like, you know, like I said, just being your true authentic self. All right, Spirit. So the next question I have in mind is, what are we learning, or what are we going to learn by being our true authentic selves? The Hierophant. When I love the Hierophant, like, once again, it's about learning. It's about sometimes, you know, taking that isolation and perspective and just feeding back into yourself. The Hierophant, as you can see on this card, he's sitting on his throne. He looks like he's in deep contemplation. And then there's also two, like right here, I'm not sure if you can see it, there's two keys. And especially from like the message that I've been talking about, you have these two keys lead to two different doors. You have the one key that is going to lead you to the life and that you've always wanted, because you're now going to be stepping into, you know, your true authentic self. And then you have the other key that's going to just lead to more of the same. It's going to lead you to, all right, well, I'm just going to stay stuck on this path of potentially not being happy because I'm not being true to myself. And so like that's where the contemplation is coming in at. You know, do I want to continue to keep staying where I'm staying, or do I want to go and actually try and figure out who I truly am and be happy? All right, this is beautiful. All right, and then like the next card I want to, or next question I want to go and ask Spirit is, the next question I want to ask Spirit is like, what are my next steps? You know, what are my next steps to, you know, releasing this falsehood, to releasing this mask? And then we have the Eight of Cups. And with this, what I'm getting is that like you have to kind of just, like I said, like release like the past. You have to like step out of your comfort zone of where you were. Like you see right here in like the depiction of like all these, is that here are 8 cups, and like you have this person in the back, and they're turning their back on this because like they know that there's more out there for me. They know that, you know, yes, like it's great to have these 8 cups. It's great to have, you know, all these options in front of me, but I don't feel like these are like the true options that like are going to lead me to where I want to be. Sometimes we have to just kind of like, you know, move in a different direction than we always been going to in order to like get to where we want to be. And then the last question I just want to ask with this deck is, sorry about that. So the last question I want to ask is, What's going to be my final outcome if I decide to be my true self? What's going to be my final outcome if I decide to be my true self? And we have the Ten of Pentacles. And in how I see the Ten of Pentacles, it's kind of just like almost kind of like your wish fulfillment. Like you're going to be happy, and it's not, I don't want to look at this as just in the instance of money or finances. I want to look at this also too as an instance of obtaining that thing in life that you've always wanted. Because, like I said, when you're staying on the path of being what everyone wants you to be, or how everyone sees you as, you could be missing out on a lot of great opportunities. And right here, I look at this as like wish fulfillment, the opportunity card, and like, yes, if who you truly are can also to lead you to having great financial success. We have this old man, he's just sitting, it looks like, in a chair. He's got his 2 dogs by his side. We have the 9 pentacles floating around him, and then we have this one giant one sitting in his lap. And he looks like he's just content. He's just chilling. Because he realized that he's finally reached where he wants to be. He doesn't need more, he doesn't need less. He's content. All right, so I'm going to put these cards away too. Let me see. Which other cards do I want to use? I think I want to use my Angel Answers deck. I feel drawn to this one. I'm not exactly sure what the question's going to be. Maybe as I shuffle, it'll just come to me. Or you know what? I'll just ask in general. Spirit, is there any other additional messages you want to give to the collective about, revealing the mask and, staying on course, or just being their true authentic selves? Is there any additional messages that you would like to give to the collective? All right, well, we have this card fly out. Compromise. All right, any additional messages? I get at least 2 more cards, Spirit. I feel like there should be 3 cards popping out. Ooh, that's a lot of cards. All right, I'll take this one over here. The next few months I'll put these away because that was a whole bunch of cards, and let's just do one more. One more card, Spirit. Alright, well, 2 cards flew out. I said I wanted 3, but we're just going to go with 4. We have Trust. And then we have Ask Your Angels. Let's see if I can get all of these into the frame. Alright, so the first card that came out was Compromise. And what I've been getting with this card, especially with the whole reading, is the fact that for the longest time you've been compromising yourself and what you wanted. Now I feel when I think of the word compromise, you have to kind of more so compromise with an offset of the life you're currently living right now, speaking about like I said, the falsehoods of letting the mask fall, playing into a role that you've always played into, and then also to starting to become the person that you're meant to be. That's the type of compromise I see for you. Instead of continuously compromising your true authentic self, you kind of have to split a little bit of your time between the person, the role you're playing, and then also to who you're trying to become. Because it's something that's gonna come with time. It's something that's gonna come gradually, It's not going to happen all at once. And it looks like the timing of all of this happening, of like, things kind of starting to go your way and like you becoming the true person that you're meant to be, is like within the next few months. All of this is going to happen for you. And like your angels just like, want you to trust the process. It's okay to let that mask fall. It's already slipping. People are already starting to kind of slowly see a little bit of who you are. And even you're slowly starting to see how people are and how they navigate and things of that nature too. So at this point, there's no point in trying to put the mask back on. It's already starting to fall. Like, so you might as well just continue to keep moving in that direction of what's going to make you happy. And then also too, like, move this over a little bit so you can see it better. The last card is just ask your angels. Like I said, regardless of if you believe in God, spirit, the universe, this is kind of like the other card that I got, and like with the first spread, which is like the power of prayer. Same situation. Like, I feel like you have to find something to believe in. And like, sometimes like the biggest thing that you need to believe in, honestly, is yourself. I remember hearing somewhere that like your guardian angels are just like you in like another dimension, or like in another like time and space, or just your future self. So like, if you don't believe in like angels, spirits, or universe or anything like that, just sit there and think like, what would your future self say? Especially like if you could be that person you've always dreamed about, like how would they act? What would they do? What would they say? Like I think honestly, for like, that's like kind of like the biggest thing I'm getting from asking angels. Like, so ask your angels, ask yourself. Sit there and contemplate. You don't have to even like really go into meditation, because I know a lot of people don't like the word meditation because they think of completely just clearing their mind. But sometimes just like sitting in silence is like the best way of getting like a good perspective on things. Because like, honestly, like we'll ask constantly for outside guidance on things, but a lot of the guidance we need really truly comes within ourselves. All right, I know this was a really long reading, guys, so bear with me, and if you stuck out this long, I appreciate you. I love y'all. I always want to close out my readings with my little fortune cookie messages. I feel like this is an amazing reading, but that's just me. All right, well, 2 of these fell out, and then I had this one stuck in my hand, so we're going to go with these. So the first one is, you are a friend who brings joy and laughter. Oops, sorry. There you go. Bring that a little bit closer to the camera. You are a friend who brings joy and laughter. The second message is, this year you will find peace and inner harmony. Literally cannot make this up. Cannot make this up. And then the last one is, embrace the power of positive thinking and watch your dreams take flight. Oh my God, all these messages are so beautiful. So just a quick brief, just my thoughts on all of these and how it ties into everything that I've been saying. You're a friend who brings joy and laughter. It kind of also too reminds me of going back to, like I said, the first deck I used where it says see the humor in things. Like, potentially like you could be like that friend who, constantly like is like I said, you're constantly helping everyone out and like people pleasing, and that's a good thing. But at the same time too, like, like you need to also to just see the humor and just like bring a little bit more joy into your life. So that's kind of what I'm getting from that one. The second one, this year you will find peace and inner harmony. The year is almost halfway over with, but like I said, we still have time to like turn things around. And I think a lot of your peace and inner harmony is going to come from you just finally being your true authentic self, honestly. Like, you just, like, you know, slowly letting that mask completely fall off and just going in the direction of your dreams. And then the last one, embrace the power of positive thinking and watch your dreams take flight. So, like, you know, in general, like, it's just kind of just saying, like, yeah, things can be tough. I know things can be tough and very frustrating and annoying. But like I said, that goes back to just kind of asking your future self, you know, if you sit there and you're thinking to yourself, okay, if I can achieve the dreams that I've always wanted to achieve, like if I am finally at that place in my life where I am being who I always wanted to be and meant to be, you know, what would that look like? And that's where the positive thinking comes in. And once you start asking your future self that, like what you need to do now and the steps you need to take and just really living and breathing in that truth, then you're going to see that those, like, your dreams are slowly going to start to come into place. All right, guys, I love you so much. I know this was a long reading. If you stuck around this long, I truly appreciate y'all. And I'm going to try and come on more. I know I say that in all my readings. But honestly, like, I don't want to come on unless I have a true message to say. And I felt like this was something that needed to get out there. And so that's why I hopped on and recorded this. And yeah, if you like what you see, please like, share, and subscribe. I'll probably just be doing a lot more shorts and longer videos. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.